Most men believe mature women want grand gestures, expensive gifts, perfect words, constant attention. And because of that belief, they spend years trying to impress women while completely misunderstanding what truly touches a feminine soul that has already experienced life deeply. But mature women are different. Life has already taught them what excitement feels like, what attraction feels like, what temporary passion feels like. They are no longer hypnotized by performance alone. What they secretly crave is far more rare, and most men never learn it. There was a man named Vincent, calm by nature, observant, the kind of man who spoke less but noticed everything. He was not the loudest man in the room, nor the most charming, but he carried something many people could not explain. Stillness. Not awkward silence. Not emotional distance. Stillness. The kind that makes people feel safe enough to stop pretending around you. Vincent met her during a season of his life where he no longer chased connection desperately. He had already experienced enough disappointment to understand that forcing attachment only creates suffering. So when they first spoke, there was no performance in him. No attempt to impress. No rehearsed confidence. No hidden desperation for validation. And strangely enough, that was exactly what drew her in. Because mature women can feel emotional hunger immediately. They have seen men trying too hard. Men shaping themselves into whatever they think women want. Men speaking without substance and promising without stability. And after enough life experience, those things become exhausting rather than attractive. But Vincent was different. When she spoke, he listened completely. Not to respond. To understand. That alone made her pause internally. Most people listen only long enough to insert themselves back into the conversation. Very few people create enough silence for another human being to feel fully seen. And mature women notice that immediately. One evening they sat together after a long day, the city lights flickering softly through the restaurant windows while conversations echoed quietly around them. She spoke about her past carefully, almost cautiously. Not because she feared judgment. Because experience had taught her that vulnerability is dangerous in the wrong hands. Vincent noticed the pauses between her sentences. The moments where her voice subtly changed. The details she pretended did not matter. And instead of interrupting those moments with advice or empty reassurance, he simply remained present. Calm. Attentive. Grounded. That presence affected her more deeply than compliments ever could. Because mature women are not searching for men who can temporarily excite them. They are searching for emotional safety without weakness. And very few men understand the difference. Weak men become emotionally reactive. Cold men become emotionally unavailable. But grounded men create stability. And stability is incredibly rare in a world addicted to emotional chaos. The Stoics understood this long ago. A man who governs himself creates peace around him naturally. His presence lowers tension instead of increasing it. His mind is not constantly shaken by insecurity, jealousy, impulsiveness, or the need to dominate emotionally. And women who have suffered enough chaos in life begin craving this more than anything else. But they rarely say it directly. Because many do not even realize it consciously themselves. They simply know how they feel around certain men. Drained around some. Safe around others. Vincent noticed this slowly. The more time they spent together, the more she relaxed into silence around him. She no longer felt the need to impress him constantly. No need to maintain a perfect image. No need to perform emotional gymnastics to keep his attention. And that is when he realized something important. The deepest desire of a mature woman is not excitement. It is emotional rest. A place where she can remove the armor life forced her to wear. Most men never provide this because they are too consumed by their own emotional instability. Their ego constantly seeks reassurance. Their attention constantly wanders. Their mood constantly shifts based on circumstances. But maturity recognizes maturity. And emotionally mature women pay attention to consistency more than intensity. Vincent was consistent. His words matched his actions. His emotions remained measured. His energy remained calm even during tension. One night, she asked him something quietly. "How do you stay this calm all the time?" Vincent smiled faintly. Not because he thought himself superior. Because he understood something she did not yet fully see. His calmness was not personality. It was discipline. Years of learning not to react impulsively. Years of understanding that uncontrolled emotion destroys clarity. Years of realizing that peace must first exist within a man before he can offer it to anyone else. The Stoics believed that inner order shapes external relationships. And Vincent embodied that without needing to announce it. What affected her most was not what he gave materially. It was what his presence removed from her internally. Pressure, anxiety, emotional uncertainty. Around him, she did not feel manipulated, did not feel tested, did not feel emotionally exhausted. She simply felt understood without needing to explain every scar life had left inside her. And perhaps that is the hidden truth most men overlook. Mature women do not secretly crave perfection. They crave relief. Relief from emotional inconsistency. Relief from confusion. Relief from carrying masculine emotional burdens that exhausted them for years. But modern men are rarely taught how to provide this. They are taught how to attract attention, not how to create peace. And peace is what stays. One evening, while walking together beneath the quiet glow of streetlights, she suddenly stopped speaking mid-sentence. Vincent noticed immediately. Not the silence itself. The emotion beneath it. Something in her expression shifted subtly, almost invisibly. Most men would have ignored it. Others would have panicked and demanded explanation. But Vincent simply slowed his pace and stayed beside her without pressure. That moment stayed with her long after the conversation ended. Because emotionally mature women remember how men respond to unspoken emotions, not just spoken ones. And in that silence, she realized something that unsettled her in ways she could not explain. For the first time in years, she did not feel emotionally alone while standing beside someone. That feeling frightened her slightly. Not because it was wrong, but because genuine emotional safety feels unfamiliar to people who spent years surviving emotional unpredictability. Most people become accustomed to tension in relationships, to mixed signals, to emotional guessing games, to constantly monitoring another person's moods in order to preserve connection. Chaos becomes normal. So when peace finally appears, the nervous system does not immediately trust it. It questions it. She questioned Vincent too. Not openly. Quietly. She wondered if his calmness was temporary. If his steadiness would eventually collapse like it had with others before him. If beneath the patience and restraint there still existed the same emotional instability she had spent years trying to escape. Life had taught her caution. And caution leaves fingerprints on the way mature women love. Vincent sensed this without needing it explained. He noticed how she sometimes pulled away emotionally after moments of closeness. How vulnerability made her softer one day and distant the next. How she occasionally tested his reactions indirectly, almost unconsciously. Not to manipulate him. To measure emotional safety. Most men fail these moments because they take them personally. Their ego reacts. Their insecurity surfaces. Their emotional balance disappears. But Vincent understood something deeper. People reveal their wounds through their patterns. And reacting emotionally to another person's fear only deepens the fear itself. So he remained grounded. Not passive. Not weak. Grounded. The Stoics believed that a disciplined man does not become controlled by temporary emotions, whether his own or someone else's. He observes first. Understands first. Responds with intention rather than impulse. That discipline created space between Vincent and chaos. And within that space, trust slowly began growing. One evening they sat together in silence after dinner while rain touched softly against the windows beside them. The room carried no pressure to speak. No need to constantly entertain each other. And strangely enough, that silence felt more intimate than conversation. Because comfort in silence is one of the rarest forms of connection. Immature relationships require constant stimulation to survive. Mature connection survives stillness. She looked at him carefully that night, studying him in a way that carried more honesty than words ever could. Then she asked quietly, "Why do I feel so calm around you?" Vincent paused before answering, because he understood the weight behind that question. She was not asking about attraction. She was asking why her nervous system no longer felt at war around him. And that is far deeper. Most women never say this openly because they themselves struggle to explain it. They only know that certain men drain them while others somehow make life feel lighter. Vincent finally answered softly, "Because I'm not trying to control you emotionally." The words settled deeply inside her. Not because they sounded impressive. Because they were true. There was no manipulation in him. No emotional punishment. No inconsistency designed to create dependency. His attention was not used as leverage. His silence was not used as revenge. His affection was not conditional upon control. And in a world where emotional games have become normalized, sincerity feels almost shocking. She realized then how exhausting modern relationships had become. So many people trying to win power over each other instead of building peace together. Testing loyalty instead of inspiring trust. Creating anxiety instead of safety. Confusing emotional intensity with depth. But Stoicism teaches something entirely different. True strength is calm. Not because calmness looks attractive, but because calmness protects clarity. And clarity protects relationships from becoming emotional battlegrounds. Vincent had spent years mastering himself before attempting to deeply involve himself with another person. He learned how to sit with discomfort instead of projecting it outward. Learned how to remain emotionally stable during uncertainty. Learned that unresolved inner chaos eventually spills into every relationship. That inner work changed the way she experienced him completely. Around him, she did not feel responsible for managing a fragile male ego. Did not feel pressured to constantly reassure him. Did not feel trapped inside emotional unpredictability. She simply felt safe enough to exist honestly. And honesty is where real intimacy begins. Over time, she started revealing pieces of herself she had hidden for years. Not dramatically. Gradually. The fears she usually disguised as independence. The exhaustion hidden beneath her strength. The loneliness buried underneath her composure. Vincent listened without trying to rescue her. That mattered more than she could explain. Because mature women are not searching for men to save them. They are searching for men mature enough not to emotionally drown them. And most men misunderstand this completely. They think love means constant intensity, endless validation, dramatic passion. But women who have truly experienced life begin valuing something else entirely. Emotional steadiness. A man whose presence does not force them into survival mode. One night, as they walked slowly through empty streets illuminated by soft golden lights, she reached for his hand quietly. No performance. No dramatic confession. Just instinct. And Vincent understood something in that moment. The deepest connections are not built through emotional pressure. They are built through emotional safety repeated consistently over time. That is why mature women rarely ask directly for what they desire most. Because words cannot fully describe it. They simply recognize it when they finally feel it. And once they do, everything inside them begins softening in ways even they cannot fully control. But softness does not appear all at once. Not in people who have spent years protecting themselves. It arrives carefully, quietly, like someone slowly setting down armor they no longer wish to carry. Vincent noticed this in the smallest moments. The way her voice changed when she felt emotionally safe. The way her shoulders relaxed when silence no longer felt threatening. The way she stopped preparing defenses before expressing vulnerable thoughts. Most people would never notice these things. But emotionally grounded men do. Because they pay attention to energy before words. One evening, while they sat together beneath the dim light of his apartment balcony, she spoke about something she had never admitted openly before. How do you make things feel so easy? The question lingered between them softly. Vincent looked at her for a moment before answering. They're not easy, he said calmly. They're just not forced. That answer stayed with her, because she realized how much of her past relationships had been built on emotional force. Forced communication, forced reassurance, forced closeness, forced understanding. Everything felt like emotional labor instead of connection. But with Vincent, there was no constant struggle for balance. No emotional guessing games. No hidden competition for power. No instability disguised as passion. And for the first time, she understood the difference between chemistry and peace. Chemistry can pull people together quickly. Peace is what allows them to stay. The Stoics believed that harmony begins within the self. A man who cannot regulate his emotions eventually creates suffering around him, no matter how attractive, intelligent, or successful he appears externally. And she had experienced that suffering before. Men who desired her deeply but lacked emotional discipline. Men who loved intensely but inconsistently. Men whose unresolved insecurities quietly poisoned every connection they touched. At first, those relationships felt exciting. But excitement rooted in instability always becomes exhausting. Vincent was different because he did not approach love from emptiness. He approached it from wholeness. And people who feel whole do not seek emotional control over others. They do not need constant reassurance. Do not panic during silence. Do not create tension to feel desired. They simply remain steady. That steadiness slowly changed her from the inside. Not because he tried to change her. Because safety naturally softens what survival once hardened. Weeks passed, and she noticed something surprising within herself. She no longer felt emotionally defensive around him. No need to overanalyze his words. No need to prepare for sudden emotional withdrawal. No need to constantly monitor the relationship for hidden instability. Her nervous system was finally resting. And that kind of rest is deeply intimate. Most men underestimate how deeply mature women crave emotional consistency. Not because they are weak, but because life has already exhausted them enough. Strong women often carry invisible fatigue. The fatigue of always having to stay emotionally guarded. Always having to remain composed. Always preparing themselves for disappointment even while hoping for connection. But around a grounded man, that burden begins disappearing slowly. Vincent noticed one night that she had fallen asleep beside him while they were talking quietly. Her expression looked peaceful in a way he had rarely seen before. And in that moment, he understood something profound. People do not fall deeply in love merely because they are impressed. They fall deeply in love where they finally feel safe enough to rest emotionally. That realization changed the way he viewed relationships forever. Modern culture teaches men to focus on attraction tactics, status, performance, and psychological games. But none of those things create lasting emotional trust. Only consistency does. Only integrity does. Only calm strength repeated over time does. The Stoics knew that true power is not dominance over others. It is mastery over yourself. And self-mastery transforms relationships because emotionally disciplined people stop spreading chaos unconsciously. They stop weaponizing silence. Stop manipulating through inconsistency. Stop projecting unresolved pain onto the people closest to them. Instead, they create clarity. And clarity allows love to breathe. One rainy evening, she looked at Vincent differently than before. Not with excitement. Not even with admiration. Something deeper. Relief. As if part of her had finally stopped fighting internally. She reached for his hand gently and asked something almost in a whisper. "Do you know what's strange?" Vincent looked at her calmly. She smiled faintly before continuing. "You're the first person who makes me feel peaceful instead of emotionally tired." Those words affected him more than she realized. Because he understood how rare that feeling had become in modern relationships. So many people leave relationships carrying more anxiety than before they entered them. More confusion. More emotional exhaustion. More self-doubt. But real connection should not feel like psychological survival. It should feel like alignment. And alignment only becomes possible when two people stop trying to emotionally conquer each other. That night, Vincent sat awake quietly after she had fallen asleep. The rain continued touching softly against the windows while the city lights glowed in the distance. And as he watched her resting peacefully beside him, he realized something most people never fully understand. The deepest thing a mature woman desires is not perfection, not constant excitement, not endless words. It is the rare experience of finally feeling emotionally safe with a man who has already made peace with himself. And a man who has made peace with himself moves differently through love. He does not rush intimacy out of loneliness, does not force connection out of fear, does not seek control to calm his insecurities. Instead, he allows things to unfold naturally, with patience, honesty, and emotional discipline. Vincent understood this deeply now, because before becoming the man she felt safe beside, he had once been emotionally restless himself. He knew what it felt like to overthink silence, to seek reassurance indirectly, to mistake emotional intensity for genuine connection. But life had taught him something difficult. Unhealed men often search for women to quiet the storms they refuse to confront within themselves. And when inner chaos remains unresolved, relationships become emotional battlefields instead of places of peace. That is why Stoicism mattered to him. Not as philosophy alone, but as protection against becoming another source of emotional exhaustion in someone else's life. One morning, while sunlight quietly filled the room around them, she asked him something unexpectedly vulnerable. "Were you always like this?" Vincent smiled slightly. No. The answer surprised her, because calm people often appear as though they were born emotionally balanced. Few people see the years of discipline, loss, self-reflection, and inner correction required to become grounded. Vincent looked out toward the city for a moment before continuing. "I used to react to everything. Silence, distance, uncertainty. I thought love meant emotional intensity. I thought if someone affected me deeply enough, it must be real." She listened carefully, not just to his words, to the honesty behind them. "And what changed?" she asked softly. Vincent paused. "I got tired of suffering unnecessarily." Simple words, but they carried years of experience inside them. He explained how he eventually realized that most emotional suffering comes not from events themselves, but from uncontrolled reactions to them. How attachment without self-awareness creates dependency. How insecurity quietly poisons even strong attraction. The Stoics believed peace begins the moment a person stops demanding emotional certainty from things outside their control. Vincent had learned that the hard way. And because he learned it deeply, he no longer approached love from desperation. That changed everything. She sat quietly after hearing him speak, almost reflecting inwardly, because his calmness no longer seemed mysterious to her now. It was earned. Earned through discipline, through emotional restraint, through learning when not to react. And suddenly she understood why his presence affected her so differently from other men. Most men she had known were emotionally loud internally, even when externally confident. Their insecurities leaked into conversations, arguments, silences, expectations. But Vincent carried inner order, and inner order creates emotional safety naturally. That realization softened her further. Not into weakness, into trust. Weeks later, they traveled together briefly outside the city. A quiet place surrounded by trees, distant mountains, and long stretches of silence untouched by modern noise. One evening they sat beside a fire while cold wind moved softly through the darkness around them. No phones, no distractions, no performance, just presence. She looked at him across the firelight and noticed something strange. For the first time in years, she was not analyzing the relationship, not searching for hidden signs, not preparing emotionally for disappointment, not questioning whether affection would suddenly disappear. Her mind was finally resting in the connection instead of surviving it. And that realization affected her deeply. Because mature women rarely speak openly about how exhausting modern relationships have become for them emotionally. The inconsistency, the manipulation, the emotional unpredictability disguised as romance. After enough experiences like that, many women stop craving excitement entirely. They begin craving peace more than passion. Not because passion no longer matters, but because peace is rarer. Vincent added another piece of wood to the fire quietly before speaking. You know what most people misunderstand about love? She looked at him curiously. They think love is about finding the right person, he said calmly. But most of the time, it's about becoming someone capable of creating peace with another human being. The words settled into the silence around them, and she realized he was right. Most people carry unresolved chaos into relationships, then wonder why connection becomes painful over time. But emotionally disciplined people create something different. They create stability. Not boredom. Not emotional emptiness. Stability. The kind that allows vulnerability to exist without fear constantly standing behind it. That night, she rested her head gently against his shoulder while the fire continued glowing softly in front of them. And Vincent understood something then that many men never fully realize. A mature woman does not deeply attach herself to the man who impresses her the most. She attaches herself to the man whose presence finally allows her nervous system to feel at peace. Because peace is not forgettable, especially to someone who has spent years surviving emotional storms alone. And once a woman's nervous system experiences that kind of peace, it begins to recalibrate what she will and will not accept. Not through logic, but through feeling. Because the body remembers safety even when the mind tries to rationalize chaos later. Vincent noticed subtle changes in her over time. Not dramatic transformations, but quiet ones. She stopped over-explaining herself. Stopped apologizing for expressing needs. Stopped anticipating emotional withdrawal after moments of closeness. She no longer felt the need to protect herself from him. And that shift changed the entire dynamic between them. Because love does not deepen through intensity alone. It deepens when defensiveness disappears. One afternoon, she asked him something while they were walking slowly through a quiet path surrounded by trees. If someone is good to you, but you don't feel that spark, what does that mean? Vincent took a moment before answering. Because he understood the depth of the question. He had heard many people confuse emotional instability with attraction. The nervous system often interprets unpredictability as intensity, and intensity gets mistaken for passion. But he had learned to see differently now.